The game Portal has been loved by many ever since its release in 2007 and later its sequel, Portal 2, in 2011. I recently played these games for the first time and really enjoyed them. Here are my thoughts. We begin Portal 1 in a small room surrounded by walls of glass and are informed that we will soon be participating in a series of challenges to test something. We are then introduced to the portal system, with a portal forming in our room and a portal forming outside the room so that we can leave. Then we continue through to the first test. I really enjoyed the tests. They felt difficult enough that I actually had to use my brain to complete them, and I think the developers used all the aspects of the game, like propulsion jumps, very well to make the tests interesting. I also appreciate the little tastes of horror we get throughout the test chambers in the later ones. Horror games are decidedly not my thing, but I do quite enjoy games where there is an implication of something deeper and more twisted going on than we can see originally. And in my opinion, Portal does a very good job at this. After we complete the final test, we are instructed to lay down with our arms at our sides with the portal gun beside us so that we can be delivered to the party where we will supposedly be getting cake, and spoiler alert, the cake is a lie. We of course don't do this and go through a door next to us instead. This door takes us to a series of rooms and catwalks and hallways through the facility to get us to the boss fight. I liked this section. I thought that, quite like the test chambers before, it used the skills we learned with the portal gun in very creative ways. It's a very long segment with not much lore or new things happening, so I did get very bored on my second playthrough during this part, but it was fine during my first playthrough. I also appreciate that Portal doesn't insult the player's intelligence. This was very evident during this section in particular, as there were only vague hints as to where to go, but we had to figure out the rest. Finally, after making it through the facility, we arrive at where GLaDOS resides. After a robotic ball thing falls off of her, she starts filling the room with some kind of neurotoxin. There's an incinerator in the corner, which we use to, well, incinerate the ball thing. After that, a small rocket launcher robot comes out of the ground, and we have to use portals to make it shoot GLaDOS and make more of the ball things to come off so that we can incinerate them and eventually kill GLaDOS, even though she's a robot and can't technically die. You know what? Never mind. I liked this boss fight, although it was slightly anticlimactic after traveling all that way to get there. This fight took me a few tries to finish on my first playthrough, and it took me about 2.5 minutes on my second one. Once you get the hang of aiming through the portals, it's really not that complicated. We end the game with a cutscene outside with fire and destruction, until it cuts to the camera moving through the facility and we reach a room filled with a bunch of spare parts, companion cube, and cake. We open on Portal 2 in a small room with a bed, a desk, a mini fridge, and a few other things. We are led through a mental wellness exercise by a robotic voice and eventually go back to bed. This begins Chapter 1, The Courtesy Call. When we wake up again, it is clear that much time has passed by the state of the room. But before we can begin another wellness exercise, the door to our room opens and we see a small robot on a track named Wheatley who travels up into the ceiling after telling us we most likely have brain damage. He makes our entire room crash through walls to get to an opening so that we can supposedly escape. We end up in the room we start in the first Portal game, and travel through a few of the original test chambers. I love that they included this. It really connected the games together and gave me a weird feeling of nostalgia, even though I had played Portal 1 just like the day before. After that, Wheatley takes us into a small elevator room thing and accidentally makes the elevator elevate and we get dumped into the room GLaDOS is in. Somehow, while elevating, we hit a switch that turns GLaDOS back on. She then crushes Wheatley and dumps us through the incinerator that we saw in the first boss fight from the last game. Obviously, it doesn't have any, fire in it anymore, and we fall into the next area. Chapter 2, The Cold Boot. This chapter is pretty simple. We go through some very dilapidated test chambers for a while and get reaccustomed to the portal system and get warmed up for some problem solving. Chapter 3, The Return. In this chapter, we go through more test chambers that introduce us to aerial faith plates. Yeah, I didn't know they were called that either. I liked these. They definitely felt like a good addition that still felt like Portal. I also enjoyed how they used them to create a bit of a funny moment with Wheatley. We are also introduced to these light bridge things called hard light paths because they're light paths that are hard. Very creative Portal. Anyways, we end this chapter with GLaDOS promising us a surprise that sounds suspiciously like seeing our parents for the first time in years. Chapter 4, The Surprise.
Initiating surprise in 3, 2, 1. I made it all up. Surprise.
Yeah, so that didn't happen. Good news though, Wheatley is gonna get us out of here. He doesn't have a plan, but he's determined. He tells us to tough it out for 5 more chambers to give him time. In that 5th chamber, he turns out the lights in the middle of finishing the puzzle. Thanks a lot, Wheatley. And we follow him through the facility trying to escape. I like this segment a lot. It had variety and wasn't too straightforward to the point that it's so simple it's not even fun. I'll admit that I did get confused at a couple of points, but that's not important. Chapter 5, The Escape. This chapter is pretty much as it's described, with a few twists along the way. Wheatley leads us through the dark with a flashlight, and eventually we make it to one of my favorite parts of this game, the turret control center. In this segment, we are trying to disable the turrets. They're those robot things that shoot you and are just overall nuisances. That way, GLaDOS can't use them against us when we disable her. Some of the turrets coming down the production line are defective, to say the least.
How's that? Target acquired. Yeah, I got it, didn't I? Anyone got any bullets?
The defective ones are tossed down a hole by some kind of machinery after being tested by some other kind of machinery. The plan is to get rid of the turrets so that GLaDOS doesn't have them. However, that's just a little too simple for us. We take out the correct turret from the authenticator thing and replace it with one of the broken ones. This part, as well as others, adds so much variety to the game that could have been incredibly monotonous during this part. It's an amazing improvement to the first game, which got pretty boring during a similar area. And, in typical Portal fashion, the defective turrets are pretty funny. We slice open the tubes, pumping the neurotoxin through the facility with a laser that is placed very conveniently right outside the door. Finally, we head to GLaDOS's room and replace her with Wheatley, which goes just so well.
Actually, why do we have to leave right now? Do you have any idea how good this feels? I did this! Tiny little Wheatley did this!
You didn't do anything. She did all the work.
Oh, really? That's what the two of you think, is it? Well, maybe it's time I did something then.
What are you doing? No! No! No!
And don't think I'm not onto you too, lady. You know what you are? Selfish. I've done nothing but sacrifice to get us here, and what have you sacrificed? Nothing. Zero. All you've done is boss me around. Well, now who's the boss? Who's the boss? It's me. Ah! That is a potato battery. It's a toy for children. And now she lives in it.
I know you.
Sorry, what?
The engineers tried everything to make me behave, to slow me down. Once, they even attached an intelligence dampening sphere on me. It clung to my brain like a tumor, generating an endless stream of terrible ideas.
No, not listening, not listening.
It was your voice.
No, you're lying, you're lying.
You're the tumor. You're not just a regular moron. You're designed to be a moron.
I am not a moron!
Yes, you are. You're the moron they built to make me an idiot.
Well, how about now? Now who's a moron? Could a moron punch you into this pit? Ah! Could a moron do that? Uh-oh.
Chapter 6: The Fall. When we eventually hit the bottom, we are greeted with the sight of a run-down, rotting facility. After making our way through the remains, we eventually make our way to a massive round door manhole cover-like thing. After getting through this, and the tiny door behind it, we eventually make it to a small waiting room and get one of our first major lore drops in the game. We learn that Cave Johnson is the founder of Aperture Science, and that he has an assistant named Caroline. Also, fun fact, Cave Johnson is voiced by J.K. Simmons. Like, J. Jonah Jameson J.K. Simmons. That was, so crazy when I found that out. Anyways, in the next section, we acquire Potato GLaDOS. She explains that the only way to save the facility from destruction is to plug her back into where Wheatley is. But before that, we have a section that I just love so much. The gels. The first gel we encounter is called Repulsion Gel. It is blue and propels you into the air if you jump on it. This gel is fine, it's cool. It adds something new and exciting to the game that still fits with the other aspects. I like this gel. This next gel, the Propulsion Gel, is also good. It basically is just really slippery and makes you go fast when you run on it. But then we have the Conversion Gel. It lets you place portals wherever it is. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Chapter 7: The Reunion. In this chapter, we travel through the facility trying to get back to Wheatley. To do this, we go through a bunch of old testing chambers they used to use back when Cave Johnson was still alive. Apparently, they despised their test subjects back then because they subjected them to the conversion gel tests. It took me so long to finish this first test, and don't get me wrong, it's a good mechanic. It works well and adds something good to the game or whatever, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Anyways, the rest of this chapter is really good. The whole vibe is just so interesting. While going through this section, we routinely see years on the side of the test chambers, and according to the year, the Aperture Science logo will change on the loading screen. Cave Johnson's portrait will change to make him look older, and probably more stuff I didn't see changes. Along the way, we hear recordings from Cave. These reveal that they originally tested on astronauts and scientists. The recordings are hopeful and full of joy. Later, though, they start testing on homeless people that Cave decidedly doesn't like, and Cave sounds pretty bitter and sad. After that, they move on to employees, and Cave talks about having the scientists put him into a computer, and he is slowly dying thanks to the moon dust poisoning. By now, he just sounds kinda done with life. The conversion gel is made out of moon dust, by the way. That'll be important later. This is probably my favorite part of this game. Just the attention to detail with how everything looks, the voice acting, the way the levels and facility are built just works so well. It also provides a ton of lore through the recordings, which encourage you to make it through to the next level, no matter how frustrating they might be. We finished this chapter off with GLaDOS planning to short-circuit Wheatley with some kind of paradox. We open a large hatch in the ceiling and head into an elevator, which leads us into the next chapter. Chapter 8. The Itch. This chapter is pretty standard. We go through a bunch of test chambers and are introduced to excursion funnels. If you enter them, you basically just go in the direction they're going. I don't really know how to explain it. It'll be on screen. They're cool, although they did make me, forget how portals work, because I'd stop seeing them as portals and more transmitters for the tunnels. That's not something wrong with the game, more something wrong with me. Chapter 9. The part where he kills you. We get to the second to last chamber and are tricked into being flung into a death trap. Thankfully, though, the conversion gel is there to save the day, and we escape scot-free. We run away from the death trap to find Wheatley and replace him with GLaDOS. This next section is a parallel to the run to GLaDOS in the first game. However, this time it was still engaging, and I still really enjoyed it, even on my second playthrough. A big part of it was probably that there were a lot more mechanics, like the excursion funnels, aerial faith plates, and the gels. It also had a lot more variety in the map. Eventually, we make it to Wheatley's lair and see a bunch of corrupted cores, and GLaDOS plans to use those to corrupt Wheatley and get her back into her body. We go inside and do just that. Wheatley throws bombs at us, which doesn't really work out because we just put a portal down to throw them back at him. After we hit him, GLaDOS sends a core, which we attach to Wheatley. After doing this a couple of times, we have the chance to replace him with GLaDOS and run to hit the button to finish the process. However, it turns out that Wheatley trapped the button, and an explosion throws us back into the chamber. This explosion, however, also blows a hole in the roof, which exposes the moon. If you remember from earlier, conversion gel is made of moon dust, and conversion gel, conveniently, is the gel that allows you to place portals on whatever surface it's on. Meaning, you could put portals on the moon, which is exactly what we do. This leads us into my favorite cutscene in the game.
In control, and I have no idea how to fix this place. Oh, you had to play bloody cat and mouse, didn't you? While people were trying to work. Yeah, well now we're all... Space! Let go! We're in space! Let go! Let go! I'm still connected! I can pull myself in! I can still fix this!
I already fixed it, and you are not coming back.
Oh no! Change your plans! Hold on to me! Tighter! Grab me! Grab me! Grab me! Grab me!
Once GLaDOS is finally back in her body, she lets us out of the facility into a wheat field, along with Companion Cube. This scene concludes Portal 2. I loved the Portal games, and they definitely live up to the hype. I do think that the first game could have been more fleshed out, and if there had been maybe some more mechanics, or if GLaDOS had a little bit more personality, it could have taken that game to the next level. Of course, it is a relatively old game, so that's probably why it doesn't have that already. Overall, though, I still really enjoyed it, and it set up the second game really well. Portal 2 is probably one of the best games I've ever played. No, it's definitely one of the best. I loved the story, the voice acting, the whole look of the facility, and although they weren't my favorite, the tests were all pretty creative and not mind-numbingly hard. Puzzle games aren't typically my thing. I'm not very good at puzzles, but that just attests to the quality of Portal 2 that I still enjoyed it this much. Overall, I'd give Portal 1 a 7.5 out of 10 and Portal 2 a 9 out of 10. So if you're maybe still on the fence about buying either of the games, I'd definitely say go for it. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because I'll be making a ton more in this format.